You're listening to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today's episode is about why toxic in-law drama leaves nothing for what matters. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast is your sanctuary for navigating the sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Hi, I'm Miriam Susan. Welcome to today's episode where we're going to be talking about just how draining toxic in-law drama is and how when we are in this constant state of being in this kind of chaos and drama, how it just leaves very little, if anything, for what really matters and what, the roles are that God has called us to be. So today's scripture reference is from the book of Philippians, chapter 4, verses 6 through 7. And this is from the New Revised Standard Version, Catholic edition. And it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus." So I want you to imagine this scenario. It's a Tuesday evening, and your mother-in-law has just sent another text. Maybe it's the 3rd one for today. Maybe it's the 12th one for today. And it's all about how concerned she is that you're not planning to do Easter at her house this year. Now you spend 30 minutes, an hour, maybe 2 hours trying to craft the perfect response, and then you send it. And then you spend another 15 to 20 minutes, if not longer, venting to your sister or your best friend. And then you spend an hour or more lying in bed that night, replaying the entire conversation in your head, trying to think about what you could have said differently. That same evening, maybe your husband tried to talk to you about his day, but you're distracted and you're short with him because of this text string that you had to deal with your mother-in-law. Maybe your son asks you to read him a story, but you're exhausted and you're irritable. And then you finally end up snapping at your daughter over something really, really small. And now, on top of all of this, you feel guilty because you have so much to deal with and you're not being the wife and mother that you really want to be. So where is that version of you that you wanted to be? Well, she got shoved aside for someone who is now responsible for putting out fires that you didn't start. And where did all of your energy go? It went to someone else who doesn't even live in your same house. So I think most of us don't even realize how much energy we are literally hemorrhaging to this drama caused by our in-laws until we are absolutely, completely depleted. So let's talk about this invisible energy leak. Drama with our in-laws doesn't just happen during an actual interaction with them. It's not just confined to when you go to visit them or they come to visit you. It is also in that mental replay loop that absolutely drains us. So here are some ways that I know that I was drained by this drama with my in-laws when they weren't even around. The biggest one was what I call anticipatory anxiety. It was anticipating the next visit, anticipating the next conflict, and kind of walking on eggshells, even just in my mind, about what is she going to say when she finds out that we're not doing Easter at her house? What is she going to say when she finds out that I'm not inviting such and such cousin to my daughter's birthday? Another way that drama kind of sucks out energy from us is replaying those conversations and interactions, because we're human. And when we're in this state of being emotionally drained, we don't always do and say things the way that we would like, right? I mean, like I said, we're all human. We make mistakes. And so we can play these things back and think, oh, I should have said things this way, or why didn't I stand up for myself? Or, why did I inadvertently lie when I know I shouldn't have lied? All these things come up without even having to be in your in-laws' presence. And then thinking about this one, I had dreams about defending myself in imaginary arguments. I had dreams where I would confront my mother-in-law and father-in-law about certain things. And that was draining. I mean, you're not supposed to wake up from sleep super stressed out or super anxious. But these conversations and these issues even penetrate into our sleep life. Our energy also gets strained when we seek out validation from family and friends and people like in my Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws community about whether we are overreacting, because we do question our actions. We do self-reflect. We do take this time to consider that maybe we didn't do things exactly how we should, or maybe we overreacted to whatever the drama was, whatever the chaos was, and we just want to know, are we doing the right thing? Not because we need to be right, but because we want to know that we are living a life that is pleasing to God. And these relationships make that so, so difficult. Another one is trying to figure out what is the right way to respond that's not going to make things blow up and get worse. Because dealing with toxic people, it's like walking in a minefield. You can walk for days and not have any issues, but you always know that there's something around that could trigger an explosion at any moment. And then another way that drains our energy is trying to monitor our husband's mood to see, did his mom and dad get to him first? Did his mom plant a little seed and start, pulling the puppet strings before we even had a conversation about what's going on? Did she get to him first? Did my father-in-law start making plans that involve, our summer vacation and talking to my husband about it before my husband and I even got a chance to discuss it? Now all this drama, all this energy suck is not just about time that, it takes away from our lives, but it is about the emotional bandwidth that is just like sucked and left for dry. It's like when you pick up your phone and it's like your low power mode. That's what we're operating on. It's like we are constantly operating on low power mode. And you know what happens with low power mode? If you don't touch your phone within a certain amount of time, it goes dead and then you have to swipe up or log in again. And then the battery is just almost spent. And you have to have time to recharge. So when your nervous system is constantly activated, it's constantly on edge by all of this stress from your in-laws, we are operating in survival mode. And survival mode means that we have nothing left for genuine, good, and loving connection. We have no mental bandwidth for doing anything creative, even like cooking dinner. I can't tell you how basic my meals were when we lived close to my in-laws. And I was constantly on edge because I never knew when they were just going to drive up. And I didn't have the bandwidth to create even like anything creative for dinner because I was just so stressed out and I had to do just like the very basics. And there's very little energy left for joy. with people who really matter, like with your children, like being able to laugh at their silly jokes or laugh and dance with them if they're, doing something funny and dancing. There's none left because it's all been drained by your in-laws. So I want to pose this question to you. How much time this week have you spent thinking about your in-laws versus actually being able to be present with your husband and with your children? I'm kind of grateful that I didn't ever think about this because it would have been so unbelievably depressing to think that they were taking up so much space in my brain that I couldn't devote to my husband and children. And that's something that I notice for my husband is that when things get really stirred up with his parents, it's like all of his mental energy is going to thinking about dealing with his parents and how to change things and how to make things better. And what could I say? What could I do? And he wasn't able to be, the husband that I knew he wanted to be because his parents demanded his attention. It didn't matter whether we had a sick child. It didn't matter that maybe we were going on a trip. It didn't matter that he was trying to work. It didn't matter because all that mattered to them was they wanted his attention right now. And so he had very little left to be the husband and father that he wanted to be. And the same thing happens to us. So that's the issue. Now, if we want to actually heal and improve this, there's some things that we need to explore. So, healing with these kinds of relationships is not passive. We can't just put a Band-Aid on it and ignore it for 7 days and take the Band-Aid off and magically it's healed. That's not how it works. Healing for these kinds of issues requires our energy and our attention. And guess what we were just talking about? What gets removed from us, what gets taken away from us? It's our energy and attention with all this drama. So what can healing look like in a marriage where you have a lot of in-law issue strain? Well, it looks like having actual conversations with your husband instead of just venting and complaining about the things that his parents are doing or not doing. It means being emotionally available when your husband is trying to process his own feelings. And this is really, really hard. If we are in a state of complete emotional depletion, how easy is it to then be emotionally available for your husband? It's not. It's not easy. Sometimes it's not even possible because we have our stuff that we're dealing with and then to have somebody else's piled on top of that. It's almost impossible sometimes. It also looks like, healing also looks like rebuilding trust and connection that's been eroded by this tension that exists. I mean, there's obviously going to be tension between you and your husband if there's issues with your in-laws. Susan Forward, PhD, wrote a book called Toxic In-Laws. And in that book, she says, if you have in-law problems, you have marriage problems. And I 100% agree. Healing also looks like creating new patterns and new rhythms as a couple because the old way is not working. So you have to try something new. And then finally, we have to attend to our own triggers and our own wounds, which maybe the situation with our in-laws didn't create, but it can be like the spotlight that has been shown on these triggers and issues that we had, and maybe we just were not aware of them. So unfortunately, here is the hard truth. You cannot heal what you're not paying attention to. Just like a wound on your hand, if you just ignore it, I mean, maybe sometimes it'll get better, But if it's a bad wound, which these toxic, relationships often are, it's going to need some attention. And if we're not paying attention to what's going on, that wound is going to fester and it's going to get worse, and then it's going to spread. If 80% of your emotional energy is consumed by this drama with your in-laws, that means you only have 20% left for everything else. And your marriage needs more than 20% to heal and grow. Your children need more than 20% to feel loved, to feel taken care of, all of those things. Our children and our husbands need more than just our leftover scraps. That's the hard truth. And we need to notice some patterns in our lives. Like when we are so consumed with managing external chaos that we are neglecting internal work. If we're so consumed with managing the texts from our mothers-in-law, the drop-by visits by our fathers-in-law, then we don't have the energy to pray the rosary. We don't have time to go to adoration. We don't have time to just sit with the Lord in prayer and think about his scriptures. We don't have time because it's gone. It's gone because all this in-law drama has snatched it away. We end up fighting fires, like I said in the beginning, that we didn't light instead of building something beautiful. If we're constantly in firefighting mode, then we're just jumping from fire to fire to fire to fire, and then we can't do anything and build anything long-term that we really desire to build. And we end up reacting instead of creating. When we're in reaction mode, that means we're just doing what we think we need to do right in that moment. We don't have time to sit back and to plan and to create the family that we really want to create. So, what is the cost of staying in this kind of in-law drama? When we stay focused on the drama, we become the very thing that we don't want to be, that drives us nuts about our in-laws. We become irritable, we become distracted, we become emotionally unavailable. We start to become controlling because our whole life feels like chaos and we feel like we have to hold on to something to have some kind of sanity in our lives so we can become more controlling. Our children, even if we do not talk about this with them, they see it and they feel it and they see us being stressed and reactive, which is probably the opposite of the peaceful presence that we want to be as mothers. And our husbands feel like they can't win because if he defends his parents, we get upset. If he agrees with us, then he feels guilty that he's not being a good son. And what we're doing in all of this is we are modeling for our children that other people's dysfunction, other people's chaos gets to control our emotional state. And the irony of all of this is that the more energy that we pour into this in-law drama, so we're just pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring, the more we end up proving to ourselves that our in-laws have power and control over us because it's never enough, right? Like we can pour and pour and pour, and then our in-laws will say, well, just didn't quite measure up. We can host all the things, we can buy all the gifts, we can do all the things, but there's always something else that was just not quite up to whatever it was that they wanted to do. So when we do this, when we pour and pour and pour, not only do we reinstate this idea that they have power over us, but we also let them live rent-free in our heads. And we start thinking about what they would say, what they would do. And that allows us the opportunity, because we always have a choice, right? But we end up being stuck in like this mental prison because we're rehearsing arguments. We're rehearsing comebacks. We're rehearsing standing up to them. We're rehearsing telling them no. We're rehearsing, what happens if I say yes? And we have this just backlog of just garbage in our heads from all of this in-law drama. So I want to ask, what would be possible in your marriage if you had all of that energy back to invest where it actually matters the most? And I want to point you back to the interview I did with Desiree Cifuentes of Uncatechized Catholic back in episode 103, just a couple episodes back. She talked about some of the valid reasons to go no contact, to cut off contact or severely limit contact with people. And one of them was, if these relationships are pulling us off the path to sainthood because we're so distracted from our vocation. So if that's the case, we need to strongly consider doing something about it, because no relationship should put our getting to heaven and helping our husbands get to heaven and helping our children get to heaven in jeopardy, even if it's our in-laws, even if it's our parents. So let me go back to the scripture reference for today. It's from Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7 that said, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Now, we need to notice what St. Paul does not say. He does not say, don't be anxious about important things, or don't be anxious about things you can control. He says, don't be anxious about anything. Why? Because anxiety does not solve problems. It only depletes and drains us and leaves us feeling exhausted. So if the drama keeps us anxious, keeps us spinning in our heads, keeps us from the peace that guards our hearts, then we are not doing what Christ wants us to do. We are not living the life he wants us to live. When we are guarded by peace instead of driven by anxiety, we then have the energy and the clarity to actually address what needs to be addressed. Peace is not passive. Peace is protective, and it guards what matters. Now, the drama is always going to be available if you want to pick it back up again. Because that's what we do, right? We always, we just tend to pick things back up again even after we should leave them at the cross. And I guess we just want to control things. I don't know why we do it, but we do. We pick up things after we put them down. And your in-laws are going to keep creating the drama because that's what they do. But you get to decide whether you're going to keep paying this energy tax. Our children are soaking up either our peace or this feeling of chaos. So the question really isn't, are your in-laws toxic? Because you probably already know that they are. And if you don't like the word toxic, maybe you prefer the word, controlling or manipulative or demanding or challenging or difficult, I would kind of suggest that all of those can be toxic, especially if there is a pattern. And Desiree and I talked about that as well, that if there is a pattern, that's different than just, people being human. All of us can be toxic. All of us can do toxic things. But when it is a repeated pattern, that's when it becomes toxic and abusive. So you can call it whatever you want. If, controlling, manipulative, demanding, challenging, difficult, whatever, if those words feel more comfortable for you, that's fine. But, we're not talking about whether, your in-laws are difficult, because you wouldn't be listening to this podcast or watching this on YouTube if they weren't. But the question is, are you going to stop letting their toxicity, their controlling behaviors, their manipulation to drain the energy that you need for healing? Are you going to allow that? That's your choice. It's a hard one. I know it's not just like, choosing to turn the light on or off. I know it's not that simple, but it really is our choice. We cannot pour from an empty cup, and our in-laws empty our cups when they act in this dramatic and chaotic way. And you can't fill your cup when someone else is like taking a pen and they're like poking holes in the cup. At some point, you have to stop letting them near your cup. And you might be thinking, well, I have to respond to my in-laws' texts. I have to respond to her calls. I have to answer when she calls. I have to respond to her voicemails. And if I don't engage, things are going to get worse. They might. I don't know. Your husband might expect you to deal with his mother. And for us, it was pretty much, if it's your parents, you got to deal with them. Because there's something different about their relationship. You will always be an outsider in some sense to your in-laws. But your husband's their son. And, if your husband expects you to deal with his mother, it makes it more difficult. And you might be thinking, well, I can't just ignore what's happening. No, you can't. You can't. But if your cup is constantly being drained, if your in-laws are constantly, like I said, like poking holes in the cup and making water drain out, how are you going to have the energy to deal with this? So here's what I want you to know. You've spent the last several minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, I don't know how long I've gone on, recognizing just how much energy you're losing to this drama with your in-laws. And you probably felt it in your gut. Or maybe sometimes like I feel things in the back of my head. Wherever you felt it because it's true. So now what? Well, you can keep doing what you're doing, spinning your wheels, replaying conversations, trying to manage the unmanageable, or you can learn how to actually become emotionally unshakable. That is the theme this month in the Catholic Wives plus Toxic In-Laws community. And you can find out more at toxicinlaws.com. We don't just, talk about the problem in the trainings that I have. I give you tools to stop letting your in-laws' dysfunction drain you dry. It's boundary training. It's mindset shifts. It's about legal protection if necessary. It's about how to handle holidays. All these things in a community with women who understand because they have been or are where you are right now. You cannot change your in-laws. Maybe they will change. Maybe they won't. I don't know. But you can stop giving them all of your energy. So I want to extend this invitation to you to join us in the Catholic Wives plus Toxic In-Laws community at toxicinlaws.com. I hope to see you inside. God bless you. Go in peace. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.